The girl, the forest, and a cry in the wind. Sometimes, the wild doesn't just need rescuing, sometimes, it comes to rescue us. The late March air carried a chill, still heavy with the weight of winter, as Sierra Bennett stepped off the gravel road and into the wilderness of Nantahala National Forest. The trees, just beginning to stir with spring, formed a quiet cathedral around her. Leaves crunched under her hiking boots, and a fresh layer of mud clung to the hem of her jeans. But Sierra didn't mind. Out here, the world made sense. At 17, Sierra was anything but typical. While most of her classmates in Bryson Hollow were planning prom outfits or binge-watching their favorite shows, she spent her weekends hiking with a battered field journal and a Nikon camera slung over one shoulder. Her auburn hair was usually tied in a loose braid, freckles scattered across her cheeks like soft punctuation marks on her pale skin. She wasn't trying to impress anyone, except, perhaps, the owls, raccoons, and deer she silently adored through her lens. Nature wasn't just her interest, it was her language. A shy girl at school, Sierra came alive the moment she crossed the threshold of forest and field. Out here, she wasn't awkward or anxious. She was grounded, clear. Her heart beat in rhythm with the rustling leaves and distant calls of birds returning from migration. That Saturday morning, she had packed light: a water bottle, a granola bar, her sketchbook, and the small first aid kit she always carried just in case. Her plan was to reach the ridge above Willow Creek by noon and spend the day documenting wild mushrooms she'd read about in a blog. But as she moved through a shaded bend in the trail, a faint sound reached her ears. A cry, high-pitched and sharp. Unlike anything she'd heard before in these woods, she froze. Wind, number. It was too clear, too desperate. A small animal, maybe a fox kit. Injured? The sound came again, more insistent this time. Sierra's heart quickened. She followed it, moving slowly but purposefully, stepping carefully over exposed roots and soft earth. The trail faded behind her, but she didn't notice. Her focus sharpened, ears tuned, every step guided by instinct. It was coming from down near the creek bed. She pushed aside a low-hanging branch and crouched near a mossy log, scanning the area ahead. That's when she saw it. Curled beneath a thicket of ferns, barely visible beneath its own spotted gray coat, was a tiny creature. Its sides rose and fell in shallow, ragged breaths. Tufted ears twitched with every sound. And then it opened its eyes, brilliant, frightened amber locked onto hers. A bobcat kitten. And it was completely alone. The eyes that changed everything. It wasn't fear I saw in her eyes. It was a question. Will you leave me too? Sierra crouched, barely breathing, afraid even the shift of a shadow might scare the creature off. But the kitten didn't run. It didn't even flinch. It just stared, wide amber eyes glazed with pain and exhaustion. Its front paw was twisted slightly beneath it, matted with blood and dirt. Its sides trembled, and tiny breaths wheezed out between its clenched jaws. This was no accident of nature. Something had gone wrong. A fall? A predator? Maybe the mother was gone. Either way, this kitten wasn't going to make it through the night alone. Sierra's heart pounded. Every fiber of her being told her what she had to do. But the other voice in her head, the one that whispered rules and laws and consequences, told her to back away. Bobcats were wild animals, protected, unpredictable, dangerous even if they looked small and helpless. But this one wasn't dangerous now. It was dying. Sierra slipped off her flannel jacket and, as slowly as she could, eased toward the kitten. Her voice was soft, trembling. "Hey, little one, I'm not here to hurt you, I promise." The kitten blinked slowly, but didn't move. That was enough. She laid the flannel on the ground beside it, folding it over gently, careful not to jostle the injured paw. As she lifted the bundle into her arms, she felt the sharp jut of ribs beneath the fur, the weak warmth of its fragile body. It let out a breathy cry, not of protest, but surrender. Back on the trail, Sierra walked with steady steps. She knew every mile of the forest, but it had never felt this long. Every stumble of her boots on the uneven terrain made her clutch the kitten tighter. By the time she reached her mom's old Subaru at the edge of the parking lot, her arms ached, and her cheeks were damp, not just from the cold wind. She didn't know what this meant yet, what it would cost, or how it would end. But the moment those eyes looked into hers, the decision had already been made. This kitten wasn't going to die out here. Not alone. Not today. Sierra opened the car door, turned up the heat, and wrapped the kitten tighter in her jacket. As she started the engine, she whispered the words that would mark the beginning of something she couldn't yet understand. "You're safe now." The choice no teenager should have to make. Sometimes the hardest choices are the ones you never had time to think about. The hum of the car heater filled the silence as Sierra sped down the winding back road toward Bryson Hollow. Every bump in the pavement made her flinch, glancing at the flannel bundle on the passenger seat. The kitten didn't stir, its breath shallow, body limp, but still warm, still fighting. She'd never broken the law before, never even skipped class. Now she was racing through the mountains with a wild bobcat in her arms. The moment she pulled into the gravel driveway of their small, ranch-style home, her mom stepped out onto the porch, arms folded. Rachel Bennett wasn't the type to panic, but her daughter's pale face and the urgency in her movements brought her down the steps fast. "Please don't freak out," Sierra called as she got out, voice shaking. Rachel blinked, looking between Sierra and the bundle. "What is that?" Sierra unwrapped the flannel, just enough for her mom to see. The kitten let out a faint, raspy cry. Rachel's expression crumpled. "Oh, honey." They got it inside, placed it gently on a thick towel in a laundry basket, and set it near the fireplace. Rachel brought gauze, a thermometer, and a bottle of disinfectant. A nurse by trade, she had seen her share of injuries, but never on a wild bobcat. "I don't even know what I'm doing," Sierra murmured, crouched beside the basket. "He's so small. What if I'm hurting him more?" "You're not," Rachel said softly. "You're giving him a chance, but Sierra—" She hesitated. "This is serious. It's illegal to keep wildlife without a permit. If anyone finds out, they'll take him. Maybe even euthanize." "I know," Sierra said, blinking hard. "But the shelters and rescues, none of them answered. I left messages. One place said if he's injured this bad, they'd likely put him down." Rachel sat back on her heels, looking at her daughter, mud-streaked face, hands trembling, red around the eyes. There was something fierce there. Not reckless, committed. "Okay," she said. "We'll do what we can. But we'll keep trying the wildlife centers." Sierra exhaled, a mix of relief and guilt. "Thank you." She spent the next hour on the phone, leaving more messages, sending pictures. Some didn't call back. One center said they were at capacity. Another advised leaving it where it was found. That wasn't an option. Later that night, Sierra filled a plastic syringe with a warmed milk formula she'd found instructions for online, kitten-safe and mixed with extra nutrients. It took 20 minutes to get the bobcat to swallow a few drops. But he did. The next feeding, he took more. She cleaned his injured paw, whispering to him gently the whole time. "I don't know your name yet," she murmured. "But you're a fighter, huh?" He blinked slowly. She smiled. Maybe he was. She pulled out her journal and wrote a single line. "If he makes it, I'll call him Ash, like what rises after fire." And right then, somewhere between defying the law and saving a life, a bond began to form. Not just a rescue, a beginning. Raising Ash, a bond born in silence. You don't truly know strength until you watch something fragile choose to live. Ash survived the night. Barely. Sierra woke every 3 hours to feed him from the syringe. Each feeding was a battle of patience, one drop, then another, waiting for the tiny tongue to move, for the body to accept the warmth. When he finally lapped a full ounce, she cried, quietly, in the dark. By the third day, he lifted his head when she entered the room. By the end of the week, he purred. Not like a house cat. No soft trilling. It was more a deep, rumbling vibration through his chest. Wild, untamed. But it came when he saw her. Ash's wound healed slowly. Rachel helped clean it every evening, wrapping it gently. They kept the kitten inside, away from windows, away from curious eyes. The risk of exposure was real, but so was the risk of letting him go too soon. Still, Sierra knew he wasn't a pet. She read everything she could: bobcat behavior, rewilding techniques, non-imprinting care. She wore gloves when feeding. She limited physical touch. She used sticks with fur toys at the end to simulate hunting. But despite her efforts, something deeper had already formed. Ash followed her with his eyes. He'd let Rachel care for him, but only settled when Sierra returned. He didn't meow. He chirped, like a bird, soft and quick whenever she approached. One afternoon, she set up a small outdoor enclosure near the back of the property. Enclosed with chicken wire, branches, leaves, and platforms. It was as close to wild as she could manage. Ash hesitated at the door the first time she opened it. Then, slowly, he padded into the grass, his tufted ears twitching with every sound. He sniffed the air, crouched low, and pounced on a beetle with his oversized paws. It was the first time she saw him play. She laughed, and then cried again. For a moment, he wasn't sick, he wasn't broken, he was just a bobcat. The weeks stretched into months. Ash grew fast. His fur thickened, sleek gray with darker spots along his back and belly. His legs lengthened, his steps surer. At 5 months, he weighed nearly 18 pounds. But with that strength came instincts. One morning, Sierra found the torn remains of a squirrel inside the enclosure. She didn't scold him. She didn't even flinch. She just stared, reminded of what he truly was and what she wasn't. "You're not mine," she whispered, crouching beside him. "I know that." But Ash looked at her as if he disagreed. They kept trying the rehab centers. Some responded now, intrigued. But the answer was always the same. He'd been with humans too long. He might not survive in the wild. He might approach people. He might be euthanized if re-released and considered a threat. No easy solution. No clear future. One day, Sierra overheard a conversation between her mom and a neighbor through the kitchen window. "I saw something strange in your backyard," the neighbor said, hesitant. "Looked like a wild cat," Rachel responded calmly. "Just a trick of the light. We've had foxes near the tree line lately." Sierra's chest tightened. Their secret was crumbling. Later that night, over tea and the low hum of cicadas, Rachel sat beside her daughter. "This isn't going to stay quiet forever," she said. "He's growing curious. One day, someone's going to notice." "I know," Sierra whispered. "So, what's the plan?" Sierra didn't answer. She looked out the window at the enclosure where Ash now slept, curled into a tight ball under a pine bough. "I don't think he's meant to be anywhere," she finally said. "Not in the wild. Not in someone's living room." "Maybe," Rachel said gently, "but he is meant to be with you." Sierra nodded, her throat tight. And in that quiet moment between mother and daughter, as the night wrapped around their little home, One truth settled like dew on the earth. This wasn't just about survival anymore. This was about belonging. Whispers in the neighborhood. When something wild becomes your world, you forget the world isn't always ready for the wild. By the time summer bled into fall, Ash had nearly doubled in size. No longer a frail kitten, he was now a muscular young bobcat with powerful shoulders, fierce golden eyes, and a confident prowl that echoed through the brush like a ghost in the trees. Sierra watched him through the mesh of the enclosure she'd reinforced twice already. He had destroyed the first two play structures she built, not out of aggression, but out of need. He needed to climb, to leap, to move like something born to rule branches and silence. His instincts had sharpened. So had everyone else's attention. A week before Halloween, Mr. Calhoun, their closest neighbor 2 lots over, mentioned to Rachel at the local grocery store, "I saw a big cat on your property the other night. Thought it might be a mountain lion at first. You girls doing okay?" Rachel had smiled, brushed it off. "Probably just the shadow of that old oak. You know how it tricks the eye when the wind's up." But Sierra felt the shift. The town was small. Whispers traveled faster than fire in a dry field. That night, she sat beside Ash's enclosure and watched him watch the stars. He rarely slept through the night anymore. More and more, he prowled after dusk, pacing the perimeter of his space, ears alert to every cricket chirp and rustling leaf. "You feel it too, huh?" she said softly. Ash didn't look at her, but she knew he was listening. Sierra had started keeping logs, meticulous notes about his behavior, sleep cycles, feeding habits, even the sounds he made. The chirps had mostly vanished, replaced by low growls and huffs, especially when she brought him food. He didn't wait for her anymore. He crouched, watched, and pounced the moment she placed the dish down. Instinct was overtaking memory. Part of her was proud. The other part was terrified. 2 nights later, something happened that changed everything. Sierra had left the enclosure's gate open by accident, while cleaning out an old bone pile Ash had buried under a slab of stone. She thought she latched it. She swore she did. But sometime around 4 a.m., she awoke to a noise, something scraping across the porch. She rushed outside barefoot, heart hammering. Ash was there, sitting calmly on the porch railing, staring into the woods like a sentinel. The moonlight bounced off his sleek coat. His tail twitched lazily, as if he'd just returned from a walk. She called him gently. He didn't move. "Ash!" He turned his head then, just slightly. Their eyes met. She didn't breathe. And then, slowly, he leapt from the railing and padded back toward the enclosure, pausing once at the door, almost amused, before slipping inside on his own. That morning, Sierra doubled the locks. But the truth was undeniable. He knew how to leave. He just chose to stay, for now. By November, more neighbors started asking questions. "Have you seen the stray cat folks are talking about?" "Some kind of lynx or mountain lion." "I heard one of the Jamesons' chickens disappeared." Rachel and Sierra fielded every question with practiced ease, but the anxiety mounted. One complaint to animal control could mean the end of everything. One knock at the door, one slip-up, and Ash would be gone. That tension wore on Sierra. Her grades dropped. She skipped a science club meeting she'd planned all month. She even stopped visiting the creek where she and Ash had first met. Every moment not spent with him felt wasted. One evening, Rachel sat her down at the kitchen table. The silence between them was heavy. "I called the wildlife board," Rachel said. Sierra froze. "What?" "I didn't tell them everything. Just asked for advice, hypothetically, about an unreleasable bobcat raised by a minor." Sierra's voice cracked. "And?" "They told me no such exemption exists. Not unless you're part of a registered sanctuary or you're an educator with a wildlife handling permit. Silence. Sierra stared at her mother. So, that's it? No. Rachel reached across the table, gently placing her hand on her daughter's. That's the start. Sierra didn't sleep that night. Instead, she sat beside Ash under the stars, legs tucked beneath her, notebook in her lap. She began a new list. What Ash needs to stay. Secure enclosure. Enrichment, enrichment, enrichment. Wildlife education license. A reason no one can argue against. Because this wasn't just about hiding him anymore. It was about fighting for him. The day everything changed. Some storms don't come with rain. They come with a knock at your door. It started with barking. Sierra was upstairs editing footage for a biology project when the neighbor's Labrador let out a series of sharp, frantic yelps. Not the bored kind. Not playful. Warning. She looked up, heart skipping. Outside, Ash was pacing. Something had him on edge. She rushed downstairs and into the backyard. That's when she saw the white SUV, marked with the seal of the North Carolina Wildlife Resources Commission. Two men stood at the edge of their fence, both in uniform. One held a clipboard, the other scanned the yard carefully, his eyes narrowing as they fell on the enclosure. Rachel was already outside, standing stiffly, arms crossed. Sierra joined her. "Afternoon," said the man with the clipboard. "We've had reports of an unlicensed wild animal being kept on this property. We'd like to ask a few questions," the second officer said, walking toward the enclosure. Ash growled low from the shadows. Sierra stepped between them. "Please, don't get too close. He's protective." The man paused, watching her carefully. "Is that a bobcat?" Sierra hesitated only a second. "Yes." The air thickened. "I rescued him when he was barely breathing," she said, her voice clear now, steady. "I tried every center I could. I logged his behavior, built a proper habitat, never treated him like a pet. I know the law, but I also know what I saved." The clipboard officer frowned. "That may be, but housing a native wild species without a state permit is a violation, especially one this size." Rachel stepped forward. "We're applying for a wildlife educator permit. She's documenting everything. She wants to start an awareness program." "It's still illegal until approved." Sierra's stomach twisted. She looked back at Ash, who was now standing at the back of his enclosure, his golden eyes locked on the stranger's. "This isn't just an animal," Sierra said softly. "He's not dangerous. He's bonded to me because I was the only one who gave him a chance. He knows me. I am his world." The officer with the clipboard scribbled something, then said, "We'll be contacting your county wildlife officer. The animal will need to be evaluated, temporarily relocated." Sierra felt the ground tilt beneath her. "You're taking him?" The officer didn't answer directly. "Someone will be in touch within 48 hours. They left. Sierra stood frozen in place long after the SUV disappeared down the gravel road. Behind her, Ash pressed his body against the fence, letting out a low, restless cry that sounded like mourning. She didn't know how, but she knew. She was going to have to fight harder than she ever had before, when the world started watching. Sometimes a story becomes a movement, and one voice becomes thousands. That night, Sierra didn't sleep. She sat on her bedroom floor, wrapped in an old quilt, staring at her laptop. Her journal lay open beside her, pages filled with dates, feeding logs, weight charts, photos of Ash's progress, from trembling kitten to proud hunter. She clicked open a blank post on social media. She had nothing left to lose. The caption came to her in one breath. "They want to take him. But he's not just wildlife. He's family. This is Ash's story. Please help me fight for him." She uploaded photos. Ash curled in the sun, perched in his enclosure, rubbing against the log she carved for him, a video clip where his ears perked as she whispered his name, and at the end, a plea. Let Ash stay. She hit post. Within an hour, the comments started. Within 5, it had over 10,000 shares. By sunrise, the local news had picked it up. By that evening, she was on the front page of the regional online paper. Teen girls fight to save Bobcat Sparks, outcry across the state. The messages flooded in. Watching from Oregon, this broke my heart. I work in wildlife rehab. I've never seen a case this documented. She did everything right. Sharing from Asheville, how can we help? Hashtag Let Ash Stay. A wildlife rescue in Colorado messaged offering legal advice. A biologist in Tennessee offered to speak on Ash's behalf if the case went to court. Someone from Raleigh started a petition on change.org. It hit 50,000 signatures in under 24 hours. But what changed everything was the call that came the following morning. Rachel answered. This is Rachel Bennett. The voice on the other end was calm, professional. This is Officer Caleb Monroe. I've been assigned Ash's case. Rachel stiffened. We're working on a permit. I've seen the footage, Monroe interrupted. And I've read the comments. I'd like to schedule a visit, not to remove him, to observe. Sierra, listening from the hallway, nearly dropped her mug. 2 days later, Monroe stood beside Ash's enclosure, arms crossed, silent as the young bobcat leapt from one post to another. Ash paused only once, to stare directly into Monroe's eyes, then slowly turned to press his head into Sierra's hand. He doesn't see her as a human, Monroe murmured. He sees her as home. He exhaled slowly, then nodded. I'll file the report, and I'll help you apply for the permit. Sierra's throat tightened. You really mean it? Monroe looked at her, serious, but not unkind. You did what most wouldn't. And you didn't do it for views. You did it for him. She nodded, overwhelmed. And for the first time in weeks, Sierra let herself believe this story might still have the ending it deserved. The verdict that changed everything. When you fight with your whole heart, sometimes the world hears you. The state hearing was held in a small government building on the outskirts of Asheville. It wasn't grand. No high ceilings or dramatic wood panels. Just beige walls, humming lights, and a circle of folding chairs that held the future of one wild bobcat. And the girl who refused to let him go. Sierra sat in the front row, her journal clutched tightly in her lap. Beside her, Rachel offered a calm smile, but Sierra could feel the tension in her mother's fingers. Officer Caleb Monroe stood by the door, his presence more reassuring than he probably realized. A quiet force. A man who had seen the worst outcomes, and yet had chosen to stand beside them. The Wildlife Commission officers took their seats. One woman, older, with gray streaks through her braid, cleared her throat. Miss Bennett, we've reviewed your documentation, your videos, your care logs, and the community response. Sierra straightened, eyes wide, heart pounding. You've done more than most licensed professionals. You didn't just rescue this animal. You studied him, understood him. You turned instinct into method. And you did it all under pressure. Another board member, a younger man with glasses, added, We've never seen a case like this, but precedent is built on moments like these. There was a pause. Then, the older woman continued. Effective immediately, you are being granted a provisional wildlife education permit. Under supervision and monthly inspections, Ash may remain in your care. You'll be required to complete certification through an approved wildlife handler course, but we believe, wholeheartedly, that you're ready. Sierra didn't hear the last part. She burst into tears. Rachel squeezed her hand. Even Monroe cracked a small, proud smile. The board chair leaned forward. Miss Bennett, what will you do now? Sierra wiped her eyes, voice trembling. I'm going to build him the space he deserves. And then, I'm going to teach people about animals like Ash, so the next girl who finds a wild soul in trouble doesn't have to hide to do what's right. The board nodded, some more visibly moved than others. Outside the building, Sierra let the cool mountain air fill her lungs. For the first time in months, she felt free. Ash wasn't just coming home. He was home. And their story? It was just beginning. A wild world together. Home isn't just where you live. It's where someone believes you belong. The new enclosure took weeks to build. Larger, stronger, higher. Sierra, with the help of volunteers from the community and guidance from Officer Monroe, designed it to be more than a cage. It was a sanctuary. Logs for climbing, hollowed trunks for hiding, and a small waterfall fed by a rain barrel to mimic the creek where their story began. Ash explored it with cautious curiosity at first, then claimed it like a king. He moved with grace, leapt with purpose, and sometimes on cool mornings, he still watched Sierra from the same corner, ears forward, like he did when he was small. Only now, the world was watching too. After the permit, Sierra launched a program called Ash's Wild World, an educational initiative focused on teaching youth about coexisting with native wildlife. Schools invited her to speak. She created video series. Local conservationists offered partnerships. But through it all, she never turned Ash into a spectacle. He wasn't a pet. He was a survivor, and he was her friend. One afternoon, she stood in front of a classroom filled with wide-eyed middle schoolers. Behind her, a projector showed a photo of a frail Bobcat Kitten in a flannel jacket. "This is how I found him," she said, voice steady. He was hurt, alone, and terrified. But he wasn't just an animal. He was a story waiting to be written. A boy in the front raised his hand. "Do you think he knows you saved him?" Sierra smiled. "I think he saved me too." Back home, she sat beside his enclosure, watching as Ash batted at a falling leaf with one enormous paw. He turned, just slightly, and walked to the fence where she sat, pressed his side against the mesh. She leaned close, their shadows touching between the wire. "Hey, wild boy," she whispered. He chirped softly, just once, the sound that had started it all, and in that quiet, perfect moment, Sierra understood something simple and extraordinary. She hadn't just rescued a bobcat. She had found her calling, her purpose, her world, and it had fur, golden eyes, and a heart full of wilderness.